Thank you. So, talking about forced abductions and conversions in Nigeria, it's become something that has been very prevalent, something that is no longer very shocking news, something that people hear about and ask, oh, who has this happened to this time around and all that, which is not, it's not good for a democracy, it's not good in the 21st century. The story of the abduction of the girls from Chibok has become a very, I think it's global news, something that everybody got to hear about. Now, that's one story about something that's been happening for a very long time, unreported, many times being denied and all that. But with the Chibok abductions, it made it very clear. It's now a fact that these things are happening in northern Nigeria, particularly with the abduction of teenage girls, conversion by force, and then marrying them off without the consent of their parents. You know, in Nigeria, we have the constitution that is the ground norm, which ought to regulate all persons and authorities in this country. But then with the adoption of Sharia law, Sharia criminal law, because Sharia personal law had always been one of the laws is in our constitution, guiding succession, inheritance, marriage, and stuff like that for Nigerian Muslims. But with the adoption of the criminal aspects of Sharia law, it brought in a conflict wherein it appears that for the Muslims, they have two laws to choose from, while for the Christians, they have just one law that governed by. Now, talking about the conversions and abductions, we have the freedom of religion, of belief enshrined in our constitution. You can choose to believe, you can choose to change your belief, and you can also choose not to believe. That's constitutional. But then in northern Nigeria, we find out that our Christian girls are abducted, they are converted forcefully, and they are married off without the consent of their parents. The story of Habiba Ishaku also was very popular in Nigeria at some point, because the girl hailed from Katsina State, the same state with the president, the current president of Nigeria. When she was abducted, her father cried out. They left her at home only to come back and they didn't find her. The last her elder sister remembered was that she was cooking. After much search, it was discovered that someone from the neighborhood had abducted her. And then they had to go through, because we have in the north different kinds of local chiefs and all that. You have the Hakimi and all those things. So he went through all that, Angwa, Hakimi, and all through the process until it ended at the Emir's palace. The father of the girl went to the Emir's palace, where he was told categorically that his daughter has been converted and she was going to be married off, and he had no business with her anymore. Now, this is something that is not, it ought not to be so, because though we have the Child Rights Act, which is domesticated by, I think, 25 states in Nigeria now, 11 states have refused to adopt that Child Rights Act. One of the reasons, of course, is religion. Now, these are part of the conflicts we're talking about, because the Child Rights Act put the age of the child at 18. Now, for Sharia, you can give birth to a child as long as the child, I mean, you can get married to a girl so long as she has reached puberty. So now, in a situation where a Christian girl has been abducted and converted without her father's consent and told to his face that he cannot have access to his child anymore, you begin to wonder, what options does such a parent have? As an advocacy organization, we wrote to the Inspector General of Police, we wrote to the Human Rights Commission, we wrote to a couple of authorities that are appropriate in this situation to do something about this situation. But nothing was done. The girl, as I speak to you, how many years after, is still there with the person who abducted her. And I mean, in Nigeria, if we say religion as per Sharia law allows that a child can be married at puberty, but then contractual laws, a child that is not yet 18 cannot have a license to drive, for example, cannot enter into binding contracts. Why should it now be that such a child can be allowed to take such, very serious decisions as conversion, changing religion, and marriage without the consent of the parents? We find this very, very inappropriate in the circumstances. And so right now, what we're thinking is that there's a need for not just local advocacy, but international advocacy to bring these things to the fore, to continue to discuss about these issues, because girls that are abducted, underage girls especially who are forced to marry, they face a lot of disadvantages. For example, the VVF is something that has become very common. You see, they get married at young ages where their bodies are not yet ready to give birth. And in the process of childbirth, they develop VVF. And then because of the smell and all the um, things, the evil, the ills associated with VVF, you find that such girls are abandoned by their husbands, and they move on. And most times, these men have the option of marrying other wives. Now, these girls are left to no future, except some people out of charity take up these girls and, bear the cost of the very expensive medical, bills and all. And then another thing is that their education sometimes is truncated. When children are married at early ages like that, their education automatically stops. Some are very lucky that their husbands are able to, sponsor them to school, but that's not the case most of the time. And so another thing we found out is that most of these abductions and forceful conversions happen to rural girls, girls in rural areas mostly. It's not limited to them, but it's prevalent in the rural areas. For example, the Chibok abduction. Chibok is a rural part, of Borno State. And so we're hoping that 11 states in Nigeria that have refused to adopt the Child Rights Act will do so that girls are protected. Talking about religion, another thing about this that we also need to be looking at and talking more is that when you decide that a child at 13 can convert, and then that same child cannot enter into binding contract, we need to look at it again. What are we saying? Are we elevating one thing above the other? I think the law should be equal. Everybody should be equal before the law, and not looking at what region does this person come from. This law applies to this person because he comes from this part of the country. If it's a united nation, I mean a united country, a federal country and all that, and we have laws that we feel regulate every one of us, then it should apply to us equally. Subjecting parents to the trauma of raising girls that at the end of the day, someone comes from nowhere and just picks the child away and truncates all the plans and all the investments such parents have had on such children. It's unfair, to say the very least of it, is unfair. And I think these are things that we should continue to discuss and see ways of resolving. Thank you.